When you fly over a ship that has been sunk, there's probably 1,300 in the water, and all you save is 300. It's a memory you can't forget.
In that short 5 or 10, 15 minutes, we lost 13 of our 36 airplanes, and it doesn't give you much time to get scared because you're busy trying to survive.
"68,000 of South Dakota's men and women enrolled in the armed services during World War II. Over 2,000 of them made the ultimate sacrifice and never returned home." Hello, I'm Major General Phil Kelly, Adjutant General of South Dakota. During the war, South Dakotans rallied to the country's defense and provided support to the war effort on the battlefronts and the home fronts. We're losing thousands of veterans every day. Not only are we losing our heroes, we're also losing their stories, their wisdom, and their experiences. With the help of a handful of veterans, South Dakota Public Television was able to capture some of those stories so we may learn from them and share them with generations to come. Here now are actual stories from some of South Dakota's heroes.
I was scheduled to finish my tour after 80 missions. And on the 80th mission, I just happened to go down to the flight line. I wasn't scheduled that day. And the leader of the squadron became ill or something, and they asked me if I'd lead the squadron. And I said, sure, I'll do this on my last mission. So we were hitting an airfield over in Germany, about 100 miles east of the Remagen bridgehead, which had just recently been taken by the American soldiers. And while the squadron circled above, I went down to look over the situation, and I strafed a bunch of planes and dropped my bombs on another section there, and then pulled up and told them to follow me on down. And of course, when I made my second pass over there, they zeroed in on me, and I had direct hits on the plane, set it on fire, and I had to bail out. And I evaded the Germans for 6 days and traveled about 100 miles, traveling just at night to get back to the near the American lines. And I was within probably a mile or two of the Americans when a German patrol picked me up one night. I was walked right into them. But it was kind of hectic. And then, of course, my parents didn't know that I was safe until the camp had been liberated and we had been processed and put on a ship that went to New York. And after we landed in New York, I was able to make a phone call to them and tell them, guess what, I'm safe.
On the morning of December 6th, which was Saturday, I was going to aerial photo school at Wheeler Field. And my squadron was over at Bellows Field on the other side of the island of Walloon. And I was waiting for our squadron commander, who spent the weekend at Wheeler Field, to come over, and I'd fly back with his pilot to be with my buddies. And we had been on alert, the whole island, for 1 week prior to that Saturday morning. And Saturday morning they called everybody in, and all the planes were being lined up row on row at Wheeler Field. 150 some odd fighter planes, perfectly straight. And while I was waiting, I jumped in the gas truck with the gas truck driver, and I said, wouldn't this make a great target if the Japanese were to attack us? Now, I didn't know, but we had heard rumors that the Japanese might. That night I went to a dance in Honolulu, met a young Marine there, and I said, well, we'll see you here next week if the Japs don't attack us. No, I'm not telepathic or anything like that, but we had heard talk. But I honestly, at the time, did not believe that President Roosevelt knew about it. But in the last few days, there's been several stories, particularly on the History Channel, indicating that Roosevelt had information and didn't pass it on to General Short and Admiral Kimmel. And if that's so, that's very unfortunate, because I was a great supporter of President Roosevelt.
Probably the most memorable incident was when they sank the Indianapolis. I was on Peleliu, and shortly thereafter, during that period, they dropped the bomb at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, not too far off from where the islands were. And while many civilians, and I don't favor atomic warfare, it was quite impressionable on a young man, 22, 3 years old, that will always remember there. When you fly over a ship that has been sunk, there's probably 1,300 in the water, and all you save is 300. It's a memory you can't forget.
War is a no-gain thing, and it's, I guess, mostly brought on by greed, by different people in different countries. And we were fortunate, I think, that we did stop Hitler, or he would have dominated Europe, I think.
This flag comes out of Munich. It's called a Reichskriegs flag, which means that it was a German war flag or a German battle flag. After I was liberated from prison camp at Moosburg Stalag 7A, a young man whom I didn't know asked to borrow my jacket because he was going to Munich. And when he came back, he says, "I brought you a souvenir." And this is the souvenir he brought back from Munich. So apparently it has been a flag that has been used by the Nazis in their battles. It has been patched several times, so it's a well-worn flag. But it came out of Munich in May 1945. It reminds me of the difference between the flag of the United States and the flag of Nazi Germany. The United States flag stands for freedom and justice and liberty for all. This flag was a flag of oppression and tyranny. It struck fear and terror in the hearts of people whenever they saw it, especially freedom-loving countries as they were invaded by the Nazis during the 1939, 1940, and later.
If I would tell the students something, it would be that it is not free to be free. The reason that they can drive their cars up and down the street is because they have been made free in our country. And the cost of being free is expensive, both in money and in life. And I don't regret my experiences, but I hope that some of those living now who might have to do that again would feel that they should take the experience of helping to make the country stay free.
There's a lot to be learned in history of all kinds, but particularly about the conflicts that our country has had to face, and that many people had to give much of themselves in order to preserve our liberty and our way of life. And I think through reading history, they will gain a greater appreciation of those things and learn what it is to be an American and what it should mean to be an American. So whenever I hear somebody say, "Oh, history's so boring, I just hate that," it makes me feel kind of bad. Because that's really the essence of your heritage, is to know where you came from.
Well, I was a storekeeper, and a lot of people kind of mistake that storekeeper, but it was a payroll department. And my boot camp was in New York, and I took storekeeper's training in Milledgeville, Georgia. And my main station was the Naval Training Center in San Diego. And that was during the war. Everything was strict there. We had to be GI all the time because of the little recruits coming in, the new recruits, I should say, coming in. And we couldn't, the World War II waves could not go out of the continental United States. We could not go aboard ship. We could not talk to the officers. But when we were downtown, the officers come and talk to us because they said the enlisted gals were far more friendly than the officers.
I was over in Germany, and our division, the 69th Division, crossed through Germany and met the Russian army coming from the other direction at the Elbe River. So I was always pretty proud of our division as being the one that met the Russians, because it ended the war. And VE Day was May 8th. And the war in Germany was over, but our division was slated to go to Japan after and finish the war against Japan. But then President Truman decided to drop the bomb on Hiroshima, and that ended that war. And so the war was over. And 2 weeks later, after VE Day, I heard from my wife back in the States that I had a new daughter.
One little girl I might tell you about that we ran into in Germany. She was standing in the middle of an intersection. Had just a diaper and an upper part on, crying her eyes out, completely lost. Well, a fellow buddy of mine from Dawson, Minnesota, picked this little girl up, and she stayed with us for 5 days, day and night, ate rations with us, rode in a half-track with us, and we finally got into a small town. And the Bürgermeister, who is the mayor in the towns in Germany, promised us faithfully that he would take that little girl and raise her. To this day, we wonder where she is.
I remember the morning that I went down over Austria. When I was awakened about 2:30 in the morning to go on the flight that day, I had the strong feeling that I wasn't coming back. I almost awakened my roommates, who were tent mates of mine, to tell them goodbye, and then I thought what kind of a crazy fool they'd think I was to wake up at 2:30 in the morning and tell them I wasn't coming back. But that was the day I didn't come back. That day we were flying a bomber mission over Wiener Neustadt, which was up in part of Austria. And while we were on the bombing run, our plane was on fire, and we were told by the pilot of the plane to be prepared to jump. And eventually we did jump because the plane was on fire and parachuted out over Austria. I was a navigator on B-24 bombers. I was arrested then and taken to the air base in Vienna, and from there to the processing center, the interrogation center at Frankfurt on the Mainz, and then sent to a camp, Stalag, Luft 3, at Sagan, Germany, which is now part of Poland, and then moved during the war as the Russians approached to Stalag 7A at Moosburg, Germany, near Munich. The hardest part of being prisoner of war was certainly the uncertainty. And then the time was long, and of course, little food, inadequate clothing and inadequate fuel for the barracks in the wintertime, and then just the anxiety of of not knowing what was going to happen, being called out twice a day for roll call or more, and other irritating things which sometimes were done by the Nazis, which seemed to us to be unnecessary.
That war is a terrible way to solve the grievances and the problems between countries. And they say that old men declare war, young men go off to battle and die. And it is, although we've known war for centuries and centuries, it's a poor way to settle the problems between countries.
With the help of veterans like Morris Magnuson, Virgil Harriott, and Ellsworth Wilkinson, we're able to learn about the truths of war and what a true hero is. World War II has become part of history. Children all over America are taught about the war. They learned why it happened and who it happened to. Children read about the men and women who proudly served during the war, and through the magic of television are sometimes given a visual glimpse of war itself. South Dakota Public Television gave several students across the state the opportunity to learn more about the war by actually asking questions of a World War II veteran. Some of our veterans then proudly answered those questions. Here now are the questions and the answers.
As a soldier fighting in the Pacific Theater, do you think it was right to drop the atomic bomb on Japan?
I would say yes, it was right. I wish they'd have dropped it sooner. And if they'd have dropped 3 or 4, it wouldn't have bothered me. Well, I was here in the States when they dropped the bomb in Walla Walla, Washington, in the hospital, recuperating from my wounds. So I just heard that they dropped the bomb, and I was glad that the war was over after that our troops can come home.
What is the most important thing kids my age can learn from your experience?
They should realize that war is not fun. You know, you have interesting things that you do and so on, but sometimes we may have to go in one way or another and defend the interests in our country. And when this is done, you have to even though your heart beats a little faster, and you know it changes sort of internally how you feel, but you realize that as a citizen of this country, if you are, as a young person, selected, you know, then that's what you should do, because we live in a free country, we want to keep it free, and so you have responsibilities in that way. And so if it comes to defending these rights and you're called to do it, you should do it.
How has the style of fighting changed from when you fought to today?
It's changed an awful lot. From the time that I was in the service in World War II, nothing was automatic. We didn't have push-button war where you could reach out and set a computer, push a button, and an intercontinental ballistic missile or a bomb would go exactly where you wanted it to. We seen this in Desert Storm, how they had guided bombs that were guided missiles is what they were. An airplane could drop them and they could put them in a doorway. During World War II, you couldn't do that. If you could come close, you was lucky.
What effect serving in World War II has had on your life, either positive or negative, and why?
The people I served with in the South Pacific, and over there you've seen many, many die, and they did it so that we might live. They sacrificed much more than us that returned. And it's a poor eulogy to those people that are buried there. On Peleliu, where I was on for 11 months, I think there's 1,456 buried Marines there. In my book, All Voluntary, I had pictures of them piled and put down, and those things to me will live there till I die.
Was there ever a time where you thought that you might not come home? And how did you feel?
You didn't have time much to feel. You just did it as it came up. When the first German jet fighters hit us on New Year's Eve of 1944, and we weren't even briefed. We didn't know what they were. They went through us from back to front so fast. We didn't have any idea what it was. It was the new 262 Messerschmitt. And in that short 5 or 10, 15 minutes, we lost 13 of our 36 airplanes. Each had 10 people aboard. And it doesn't give you much time to get scared because you're busy trying to survive. And when they came by, in the split second that you got to see them, they looked as though they were scared as we were.
When were you most afraid?
I was on guard duty. Not guard duty, I suppose. They used free infantry as much as they did artillery. And the Japs come in using foxholes. And they says, shoot anything that's moving. Because they gave orders for nobody to go outside of their foxholes. In the morning we found Japs and water buffalo. They used water buffalo to get up so they didn't think we'd shoot, see. That was the worst one.
What part of the war impacted you the most and why?
Well, I guess there's so many incidents. Probably the thing that affected me the most was we were at Okinawa, and a kamikaze pilot flew into our ship, and he dropped his bomb and missed the ship, but he flew his plane right into the bridge of the ship, which killed our skipper and our executive officer and a lot of signalmen I guess that impacted me the most because our ship was out of commission. We had to steer from a different steerage, and we went back to Oakland, California for repairs. And while I was in Oakland, California, the VJ Day happened, and that was, of course, was the end of the war.
Strong arguments exist that Roosevelt knew about the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and he let it happen so America could enter the war. What's your opinion on this?
I do not believe that Roosevelt knew that the Japanese intended to bomb Pearl Harbor. I do think that General Marshall, and General Stark in Washington, and maybe the President and Secretary of State knew that we were close to a war, or were actually on the verge of war, and that they should have given Kimmel and Short adequate warning, and would have probably saved a lot of lives.
What was it like fighting in World War II, knowing that any second you could die?
The only time that I ever felt like that was when we were getting ready to invade Japan. If we would have had to invade Japan, I'm sure the casualties would have been horrendous, because the Japanese people were not ready to give up. And they wouldn't have given up until a lot of them were killed, or where they couldn't fight any longer. There's been some discussion that President Truman shouldn't have dropped the atomic bomb. But if you talk to anyone that was waiting to invade Japan at that time, I'm sure that you won't find anyone that disagrees with that it should have been dropped when it was, if we had the bomb at that time, because it saved a tremendous amount of lives, both Japanese and American.
Now that you've seen the effects and consequences of the war, If you were given the chance today to enlist in the same war again, would you do it?
If I felt that our country was being threatened, I wouldn't hesitate. I would be ready to fight again. We live in the best country in the world, and I think that all children growing up today need to realize that that's the case, and should never pass up the opportunity to serve the country if the call comes up.
How did you feel when your friends or people near you were being killed?
When we were bombed, I think we were all praying that the bomber would go a little farther over before he dropped his bomb. Which on Guadalcanal we had a bomber about every night. They called him Wash Machine Charlie, one lone bomber. He would fly around and round, and then after a while he'd decide to drop his bomb and go home. But you know, they had him. We could see him in the searchlights. So it was kind of nerve-wracking until he finally got out of there, because he didn't know where he was going to drop his bomb.
As Adjutant General of South Dakota, I'm proud to have the opportunity to bring you the true stories from some of South Dakota's own World War II veterans. For the many men and women who lost their lives, and for those who are still among us, on behalf of South Dakota Public Television, thank you.